A strange day. A strange day indeed,
thought Dark Day. Among all the terrible fates within the bowels of Playtime Co.'s prime factory was poor Dark Day. A bigger body's toy, his past forgotten and erased, his human rights taken, used as nothing more than a child caretaker. During the hour of joy, he was one of the few who didn't succumb to violence, which until now he paid for in blood. He was strung up, hanging from the ceiling of a tiny cell, being exploited for his flesh and body. The critters, children turned into toys, violent and ravenous, like piranhas, feeding on him whenever they behaved well in the eyes of their master Catnap. He was nothing but a shell. By now, all organs required for him to function were devoured, and half of his body was entirely missing, and yet, whatever mutation was necessary to turn a human into a toy kept him alive. He had, for all intents and purposes, given up on ever getting out of here alive, especially with his half-eaten husk of a body. However, be it due to Catnap's neglect, or one of the critters feeling silly, as he looked up, more out of boredom than actually seeking for something, he noticed it. Tiny holes in the rusted metal of the pipes he had been strapped onto. He inhaled silently, knowing being too loud would cause a feeding frenzy, as the critters, like most other toys, just lie dormant to save energy most of the time, would awaken, and surely devour him whole. A strange feeling opened up inside of Dark Day, a feeling he didn't feel in ages. His natural instinct told him to ignore it, but then he decided against it. Coughing quietly, he moved his arm, causing cracks to appear between the holes of the pipe. He exhaled a puff of his own gas, as little as it was left, to calm his mind. Every movement needed to be very specific and vital. Dark Day managed to survive his endless hunger by preserving his energy, so this was the most strain he had ever put on his body for a long, long time, at least compared to his prime. His body creaked and ached as he repeatedly pushed against his restraints. And then a loud metal crash indicated his freedom. There was just one problem. The moment the metal bar had fallen to the ground, as well with his almost useless arm, the entire playhouse in which he had been held captive woke up. Dark Day let his head hang low. Well, at least his end would come quickly now. But just then, a second loud noise echoed through the building. He raised his head. Wait, that wasn't him. He perked his ears up. Neither did he pick up any giggling or gibberish coming through the pipes around him. As if on cue, more loud noises echoed, followed by both tiny screams as well as deep, loud, familiar growling. It was Catnap, and it sounded like he was in a fight. Panicking, Dark Day now used his other arm to help with the belts holding his body in place. If a toy, or maybe even a human, had come down here, and they were right now battling the monstrous purple fiend, then there may still be a chance for his escape. Hunger made humans desperate. And honestly, you still saw yourself as a human, despite looking the way that you did. As such, just lying down and dying wasn't an option. And you would never forgive the prototype for ruining your life. You were one of the last bigger bodies Playtime Co. had ever created. Ironically, also, one of the first test subjects we brought in. A volunteer. You had lived a terrible life, and somehow ending up as a janitor at Playtime Co. was the best thing to ever happen to you. So when you were offered an escape from your life, and a new identity coming with it, as a living, breathing Becky Does It toy, you were all for it. The Becky Does It toy and the Does It crew were a short-lived line of toys to inspire the youth in acquiring different, unusual, overlooked jobs, such as Brian Does It, who was a postman, or Tony Does It, who was a sewer worker. Well, there was a reason the toy line didn't do so well. What kid wanted a sewer worker toy? Well, in your case, you were a female police officer, your male equivalent being Bob Does It. You were intended to work with whoever had signed up to be Bob to support the security staff of Playtime Co. Just like the toy, your new life had been inspired by, you had a short blonde ponytail, beautiful Caucasian-colored plastic skin, and you were dressed in a Playtime security uniform. At least, that was the initial plan. As the problem was that during the procedure, your transformation into Becky Does It, the hour of joy happened. You awoke, feeling the worst pain imaginable, seeing the worst thing imaginable. Dead doctors, while your body was still more or less ripped open. Luckily enough, your toy transformation had been finished. Internally, at least. You survived. But it wasn't good. Your hunger wasn't properly suppressed, meaning you couldn't just lie down like all the others. Half of your body had been in the process of being flailed, and never given its living plastic shell, leaving patches of your body exposed to the elements. Luckily, your face had already been transformed. The Does It toys, since they were human, also had functioning bigger bodies toy mouths, so you'd be able to eat. Meaning your new life at least was in a body that was familiar and didn't require long training to adjust to it. Back then, you had sustained yourself by scavenging and setting rudimentary traps from your Girl Scout days to stay alive. But as the resources dwindled inside the factory, and you started running out of painkillers and food, you had sought out a new source of survival, which came in the form of cave mushrooms and the meat of other toys. The fact that all of them were once human, not mattering anymore really. You just wanted to live. And one day, as you explored the lower sections of the factory, you discovered it. The underground complex of Playcare. Magnificent and decadent. Beautiful, mystical, horrifying. At first you started small and quietly, using leather belts to cling to the metal cables of Playcare's transit system, rather than actually using its carts. You haven't seen this place ever before, as such you didn't know what housed here. And there you discovered it. Catnap's red gas and the titular purple cat. Your self-taught survival training making you just stealthy enough to make Catnap realize there was someone here, sure, but never actually catching you. You stole his tanks, his precious gas. Huffing a minor dose got rid of the pain, but never enough to mentally affect you. Hunting the creatures that nested down here, including rats and the occasional spider. Often returning to the cave system to look for mushrooms. Sure, they were gross, but edible, especially roasted on a campfire. You had created a system with a tent. It was almost alive. Something. And the fact that one wrong move could cause your untimely demise was only vaguely on your mind. You were just too hungry. But today of all days, when you were starving, you were unable to scavenge anything. And so you had went for it. The ruined critters of the playhouse. I never dared before to do this. They were terrible little beasts, but untouched by starving toy hands. Problem was Catnap. Of course, had to be in the building by sheer coincidence when you had started hunting. With your self-made spear, crafted from the fragments of memories that still swirled around your brain from your human life. From the context, you remembered watching a documentary talking about Stone Age living. How very fortunate. During the primitive times, when humans were the hunted most of the time, spears could be considered the equivalent of an ICBM. They had range, were easy to make, were functional, and well, this spear was right now pointed at the big, scary, smiling face of the purple, smiling critter.
You.
Growled Catnap threateningly, a puff of red smoke coming out of his mouth.
You have been the bug infesting my halls for far too long, Missy.
You exhaled through your mouth. There were sarcastic insults coming to your mind, but you dismissed them. They would cause you to not take this serious, and potentially die. Catnap was sizing you up as he stepped towards his left, circling you, while you kept your spear in a tight grip.
You come here, steal from me, murder my children.
The smiling critter you had killed was hanging from your belt like a sack of meat.
And I bet you still desire, expect mercy?
Without warning, he swiped at you. It was a low swipe, so you jumped, your feet brushing over his dirty fur.
And feisty too. You'd be a great acolyte for my lord, but he hasn't ordered me to keep you alive, so death is all you will get.
He stopped in his tracks for but a second. Your eyes widened in anticipation. He was getting ready to pounce. Quickly you rolled to the side, causing the jumping Catnap to slam his face first into the wall. It was this chaos that Dog Day was hearing in the moment of his escape. The small critters afraid to do anything while Catnap was in the building. With a loud cough, Dog Day fell to the ground. The pain in his lower body, missing lower body, was blinding. But still, desperately, he began crawling forward. He vaguely remembered the layout of the playhouse from his own time as a human, and time as a toy, many, many years ago. Huffing, he shoved his big body into a red slide tube. He almost screamed with joy as he felt the wind comb through the fur of his face. Doctor was feeling so many sensations, so many emotions in this moment. He wanted to sing, to scream, to laugh. He was moving again, painfully, just dragging his sorry body. But he was going to be free, free from catnap, able to die alone, in peace, quiet, his own terms. He didn't care, as long as the prototype didn't get a hold of him. That was all he wanted, all he dreamed of, all he dared to dream of. With one final push, he leaped at the metal door that was the playhouse's fire escape, his heavy body slapping like a sack of potatoes on the artificial grass of Playcare. Oh, the state of it. A lot had changed, and by a lot it had been run down. It was sad. So sad. But his nostalgic melancholy was completely overwritten by the joy of seeing something other than the bloody walls of the playhouse. Look at that. Even the transport cart was still right there yonder. Its door open, inviting him. One last time he turned around, looking towards the noises of combat.
Oh, sweetest angel of my rescue, though I have never seen your face, your memory will always stay within me with the highest honor I can bestow upon you. I will never forget you.
He spoke. Of course you didn't hear it. No one did. This was all for himself. Desperately now he crawled forward. Push after push over the harsh, rough asphalt and the fake grass, until finally his paws took hold of the machine's platform. Groaning, straining, huffing, he threw himself into the machine. He needed a breather. So he rolled himself into the furthest corner of the machine, breathing in, breathing out. It was then, moments later, when he heard the unmistakable roar of catnap and the noise of plastic pitter-pattering feet across stone. You had barely escaped catnap with your life. The fight ruining half of the playhouse, even more than it already was. But you lived, and you still had your scurried meat. With your heart racing, you threw yourself into the gondola that connected Playcare with the rest of the factory, leaned up and pressed the button to leave, and slowly the cart moved. Without much thinking, you raised your spear, holding out your other hand for aim. Catnap was rushing towards you. And then you threw the spear with all of your might, hitting the charging catnap who had been right on your heels in the front leg. He screamed in anger and pain as blood gushed from the wound, crashing onto the ground and curling himself up into a ball as he threw a tantrum. His prey escaping him only by a hair's length had still harmed him. Arms and legs spread out, exhaling through your mouth. You lied there. Silence. Well, with the exception of the creaking motor of the gondola. But as you raised your head, your eyes met Dog Day. Immediately you shuffled backwards. He could see the fear in your eyes, though. It almost amused him. He was in no shape to attack or defend himself. If anything, he was scared of you, despite you foolishly throwing away your weapon. Come to think of it, for a moment he wondered what Catnap was doing right now. Judging by the sound, you actually managed to hit and hurt him. Silently, you stared at each other. If it wasn't for him quietly breathing, you'd assumed he was dead, or a hallucination. The cart was halfway to the factory when he finally spoke up.
I know you, Angel. I suppose not you, but your toy. I've seen a cutout of you.
You nod slowly.
I thought your toys had a bigger body.
He tilted his head.
You aren't aggressive. You have your humanity still.
He chuckled darkly. Well, I got a little more than just a little. There was bile in your voice, and curiously Doctor leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, as he opened up your tattered, bloody security shirt, pulling down your left shoulder, revealing your scarred skin. From the little Doctor could make out of your chest, he could see the line where the skin turned to plastic. Your actual skin looking much more pink and weathered.
It appears you are more human than any of us.
You smirked sadly. Makes it easier. Not starving, I mean. It took Dog Day a moment to understand what you meant.
Survivalist. I've heard how Iwagi is one of you. Neither aligned with the prototype nor Poppy.
I want to escape. This caused Dog Day to laugh.
Escape is but an illusion. We're all doomed to die here.
You crossed your arms.
It has been 9 or 10 years. If you could escape, wouldn't you have done it already?
I would have. Have you guys stopped killing each other? Offended, Dog Day leaned back.
I myself haven't killed anyone.
You looked at his body. Yeah, I suppose you never did. He chuckled darkly. Meanwhile, you pulled your shirt back up. 10 years of the apocalypse, you said finally. I counted the days. It's not 9.
Right.
You sighed. It isn't even the starvation or the fear that gets me. Dog Day's ears perked up. It's the boredom. We have reached a point where there isn't enough food. So you get bored, scavenging empty shelves. What was actually just anxiety and fear of death, you called boredom just to cope with it.
Well, it is a disappointing world, Angel.
Angel? If Dog Day could widen his smile, he would.
Well, Angel, you saved me. Even though it wasn't intended. You are the angel of my rescue. As such, you're my angel.
Oh, that's sweet. You admitted and smiled, taking hold of your right arm for comfort.
So not 9 but 10 years I've been held captive.
Hearing that made you gasp. Wait, captive?
Catnap was holding me captive in the playhouse, Angel. It was hell. Truly hell.
By the state of his fur and missing lower half, you could tell. A little reluctant, you began crawling forward. There was a feeling of pity in your gut.
Angel.
Once you were next to him, you sat there for a moment, allowing him to take a good look at you. Your plastic was heavily damaged, but managed to just barely keep itself together, to not leave you with permanent open wounds. Your plastic face was slightly burned, enough to look normal from a distance, but up close you could see the plastic had bubbles and singed in various places. Your hair was dirty and cut much shorter than the cutouts indicated. This was probably due to it getting into your face. He then gasped. Your hand took hold of his paw.
Angel, what are you doing?
With only mild hesitation, you leaned against him. He inhaled and exhaled loudly. Despite the grime, sweat, and blood, his sensitive nose just barely made out the faint, sweet smell of a woman. That, combined with the warmth you shared with him as you pushed into him, made his body feel hot. You are a good boy for surviving all this. Dr. gulped loudly. It had been so long since somebody talked to him like he was an animal. But he kinda liked it. It was the first nice thing he had heard in a long time. You swung your body around his cut-off hip, giving him a tight hug. Dr. smelled of burnt plastic, blood, and moist, moldy plush.
I think I can die happy now, Angel.
Don't die on me yet. Please. You begged. Leaning back, you looked into his eyes.
Well, if you insist, little angel, I promise.
It had been so long since you had seen a friendly face. You looked at each other for a moment. And then you leaned forward, gently kissing the upper lip of his ever-grinning face. Your soft, plastic lips pressing against his felt. You could taste the burned polyester of his body, but you didn't care. In the hell of the factory, this was a tender moment, and tender moments were incredibly rare and needed to be cherished at all costs. Hey, thank you for watching my video until the very end. I'm very glad you enjoyed it so far. But before I say goodbye, I would like to shout out all of my lovely high-tier channel members. Twilight, Zoe, Angel, Angry Boxman, Chuster Misery, Hella, BitBit, Melofia, Anonymous Weep, Sleepy Town, Zachary, Nicodemus D, Ash Wisdom, Ikea, The Tribute, and AJ Anime Girl. Lastly, I'd like to thank all of my other channel members. You're all wonderful little mates. Thank you for watching. Bye.